All right, welcome everybody to the September 6th Board of Selectmen meeting. Everyone is present, so Ms. Bonson should be a few minutes late. Public comment, anyone here that has anybody they want to talk about? Hearing none. Approval of minutes from August 16, 2017, regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
August 30, 2017, regular session.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Warrant article, Pat?
I make a motion to approve the warrants for the period covering August 17th, 2017 through September 6th, 2017, including payables warrant for the town FY 18, 8, 9, and 10, payroll warrant FY 18, 4, and 5, sewer enterprise warrant FY 18, SE 7 and 8, school warrant FY 18, S3, and municipal light plant warrant FY 18, number 5.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Paul Parker from ABM, come on up.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just
Sure.
to open the conversation. As you know, we worked with ABM on our ESCO project for town buildings, with the majority of the work taking place at the schools. And part of the contract that we have with ABM is that there would be a measurement of the energy savings that were achieved with the efficiency projects that were done. This is technically the third ABM measurement and verification, I think, that's been completed. And tonight, Paul and his team are here to present with us the information from this last study that took place this spring.
I'm Paul Parker. This is Brian Walker. He's our MED manager.
Okay.
I will defer to Brian to review the report with you.
Absolutely.
Anytime you're ready.
We did give handouts to everybody.
Thank you.
Good evening. Once again, Brian Walker, Measurement Verification Manager for ABM. I'm back before you again for yet another year to report good news. You've exceeded the guarantee for the energy savings project. I'll just quickly direct your attention to page 3, which lays out an executive summary. We've exceeded by almost $5,000 over our guarantee. The lighting conversion over to LEDs is driving tremendous savings. In addition, we replaced boilers in the schools and switched fuels, which is just driving tremendous savings for you guys on that. And the bulk of the rest of these were based on agreed upon values. There were some minor differences at completion, so that's why you see some of those in the negative. But overall, it's been a great project, great results to report. I'll just direct you to page 6 now, which kind of lays out how we went about the measurement and verification process. We're looking at the individual measures, not a whole building evaluation, so we look just at what was replaced. On page 18, you kind of see the results of your fuel switch. Even though we are using slightly more energy, we're driving almost over $120,000 in savings just from switching off of fuel oil to natural gas. That result could be even higher, but the price of natural gas has just absolutely dropped almost in half since you've done the project. So we were over $1 a therm, and now we're somewhere at 67 cents a therm. So you're saving even more money on the cost side on that. And then finally on page 25 just kind of shows the results over the last couple of years of the rates. Again, the effects of the cost of natural gas going down is just helping your town, even though we're not recognizing from the rates where they were originally. And with that, I'll field any questions you may have.
I know in the first year, and maybe even in the second year, you guys had to go tweak the system, do things to guarantee the savings over this period. Was it just monitoring, or did you have to still continuously do adjustings of the various pieces of equipment in order to guarantee these savings?
Sure. So back in October of 2016, we did come out before you guys really, your heating season really kicked in and evaluated the boilers. And what we found is we can try some additional efficiencies in the peak seasons, not during when it's, the dead of winter, but we found that we can try some additional efficiency at the boilers. So that's what we did at that point. And it turned out fairly well for you guys during that period.
So, but as far as all of these, so you tuned up the boiler, or you did something to the boiler. As far as all of the other savings, you just measured it, yep, they're working the way they're supposed to work, and you didn't have to do anything to those at that point?
Exactly. I mean, we monitored the scheduling to make sure we were shutting the buildings off and setting back temperatures. All that was in place. We were able to monitor that from the control system.
Do you anticipate moving forward that it would just be a monitoring thing, or do you think there would still be things that would, tweaking of the boiler was one of them? Do you think that would still be something that would be needed? And if it is needed, is it something that could be done in-house or through, a third party that's not doing the whole monitoring thing?
Sure. I just anticipate monitoring at this point. I think we've driven as much as we can efficiency-wise out of the boilers. If we see something on the control systems when we log in, we'll certainly come out and take a look, and if anything's wrong, we'll report back out and fix it.
So, when you just measure by BTU, how much the savings is. Do you know how much actual money was spent on the fuel? Is that in the report anywhere?
Yes, it is. If you look at page 18, once again, you'll see the next to last line of that graph, a little over $65,000 in natural gas for the entire year across all buildings. Or excuse me, across the high school, middle school, and elementary school.
And the oil was
185?
185?
That's what you would have spent had you remained on fuel oil.
Wow.
That's in today's fuel oil dollar prices, not what they were when we did the project?
Well, we would have had to evaluate them at the point of the contract, what they would have been.
Well, understood, but you're working on the natural gas, part of the savings is the price of natural gas has been cut in half. Well, so has the price of oil. So when we did this, we had, okay, we're spending $3.50 a gallon on oil, now it's $1.75, give or take.
Sure.
Is this 185 based on the oil consumption we were using and today's price, or the oil consumption we were using and the price 3 years ago?
So the fuel oil price is based on back in 2012, 2013. We had no idea, obviously, the price of fuel and natural gas would crash. So there's no way to really evaluate that.
I'm sure there is. If you know the price, the dollars that were spent, you know how many gallons that were bought. Take those gallons and you multiply it by what the average price of fuel oil would be today.
That may be the case, but in order to evaluate what you spent on fuel oil strictly depends on deliveries. So there's no clean way to say that you definitely used this much fuel oil in that month. So this is strictly based on the fuel oil that was delivered back in 2012, 2013.
So when that thing, the cost of natural gas is what it costs now, not what it cost in 2012. Am I correct?
It is what it costs now in terms of dollars.
So it's really not 3 times the savings.
It's not $120,000 savings.
Because that 185 number, realistically, the price of oil, price of gas dropped in half, so did the price of oil. That 185 number realistically would have been 92.5.
Sure. I understand your point of view. That's just our standard way of evaluation.
So, to put it another way, if the price of natural gas hadn't got cut in half, you would be $60,000 short on your savings, because instead of it being $65,000, we would have paid $130,000 for that same natural gas back in when we started the project.
That's a potential. We don't know that for absolute sure.
No.
We would have certainly tried to come out if we saw that, actually developing, and try to evaluate the system and see if we could try some more
This has
savings.
nothing to do with the system. This has to do with the price of the fuels being used by the system. My first question was, is the fuel oil based on the historic price when we did the conversion? The answer was yes.
Yes.
The natural gas is based on today's price. So as part of your savings, you're sitting here telling us that part of the savings is being driven by the cost of natural gas being cut in half. But you're taking credit for the cost of the natural gas being cut in half. The fuel oil expense, you're saying, oh, that would have remained constant at 185. We know that fuel oil was cut in half. Now, my numbers it's not exactly half, but if fuel oil was cut exactly in half, that 185 number, to do an accurate comparison, would necessarily have to be cut in half. When a year ago, I asked this question, and the answer I got was, no, it has nothing to do with the price of the fuels. A year ago, and I don't know if this would be in the minutes because it's a very detailed thing that I asked. A year ago, I was told, no, we're comparing therms to BTUs. And we're converting therms to BTUs, and the savings we gave you it's the savings in therms and BTUs. And that's not what I'm hearing today. So, I have an issue with the answer I got last time was no, it's just the energy savings. Now you're telling me, oh, well, yeah, part of it's the price of natural gas getting cut in half, but we're using a fictitiously high price of oil in order to come up with the savings.
Well, I mean, and once again, if we'd stayed on fuel oil, you'd still be using even less. So, I mean, how much less, that's not how we evaluated it. So I can't give you exact figures of what the fuel oil would be before and after if we stayed on fuel oil. I can certainly give you another method of evaluation using the current cost of fuel oil to just see what that difference is.
I mean, to me, a more accurate evaluation, it would be, you do one of two things. You can compare, you take out what the price of fuel is today, and you look at strictly what the price of fuel was back when we did this. You look at the gallons of oil we used versus the gallons of natural gas, or whatever the measurement in natural gas is, and you compare them and you say, okay, you're using half the amount of fuel. But you're telling me, as part of your evaluation, you're taking into account the savings on half the amount of fuel, and you're comparing the cost of the fuel, half the amount at half of the price, versus the full amount at the historic price. Am I missing something?
No, that's true. I do recall the answer that was given during the last measurement and verification report was based on the fact that the savings were measured in the therms, not in the unit pricing of the fuel that was used. So to that point, based on the chart that's on page 18, could you explain to us the savings in terms of the units of therms rather than in the dollar values?
So if you look right above that, and again, this is just at the elementary and middle high, you're actually using slightly more BTUs. The cost of natural gas was always much lower than fuel oil, regardless if, we evaluated in yesterday's dollars or today's dollars, and I certainly understand your concerns there. So you are using a little bit more. In conjunction with that, you're doing additional conservation measures at other buildings, so you're getting additional fuel savings that way. All in all, on page 3, we projected that you saved a little over 40,000 therms in total.
Well, I'm an accountant, and I don't understand how we're coming up with the savings, and I'm not going to get it here tonight, but that's okay. Let's move on.
Question?
So the guaranteed, that you folks guaranteed us for savings was the 218,000?
That's correct.
That's not what you said.
And we actually saved, and does that include that oil?
It does.
That includes that oil to gas savings?
And you get an answer?
Hold on 1 second.
I'm sorry. Good.
So that's included in there, that oil to gas.
That's correct.
out of that, 223,000?
It's the very first line of the chart there.
114? The fuse switches, is that what you said?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so the lighting, is that the electric bill?
It's not based on the bill. It's strictly based on a reduction of wattage before and after, and we agreed on a certain amount of run hours in certain spaces and multiplied by the current electric rate.
But you don't compare that to old electric rates, you compare it to just wattage?
Well, no, we take the bills for the current 12 months that we're on and use that rate, so it does fluctuate up and down slightly. But electricity has remained fairly constant over the past 3 years.
Right. Okay.
So, like the steam trap repairs and installation and stuff like that, why wouldn't that have saved money? I mean, it looks like what you projected was like half of what it actually did.
Yeah, so, some of that is, again, we calculated a certain number of steam traps are being changed, and we changed fewer. Some of that is also the gas rate actually going down. So I think initially the natural gas rate was above $1 a therm when we were doing the project. Now it's at 67 cents, and that's what we're using to calculate the dollar amount of savings. So we're using that 67 cents a therm number throughout.
Any other questions?
I know Pat's gonna look into this more, but I agree with what he's saying, but I guess we're gonna have to look at it in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna get the answers tonight, but I'm,
So the guaranteed, the actual savings might have been below the guaranteed savings.
well, I can tell you, give me 1 second, let me just do it, was 10, we're using fuel oil expense price in
Page
the
one.
comparison of $3.21 for what would have been purchased in May of 16, and $3 in what would have been purchased in November of 16. To come up with the dollar savings, that's a statistical lie. The dollar savings, based on this chart, the dollar savings are not there, because in May of 16, fuel oil was about $1.79, not $3.21. So these savings are fictitious. That's my conclusion looking at this report.
Well-
Maybe the way the contract was written, but these savings are not real.
And I would say, if you're going to evaluate it that way, we'd have to use the natural gas price back at that point in 2012, 2013.
Which is fine.
Or
but-
the other way around.
Yeah, or the other way around. You're using, what you're doing is you're saying the fact that natural gas gets cut, the price of natural gas gets cut in half, enhances our savings, and now we have a net positive of 5,000. And I don't know if oil and natural gas moved at the same time, but we're using historic prices of oil versus current prices of natural gas, and it's not a true indication of the savings. You're playing with statistics, and the analysis is flawed. That's my conclusion. And I'm going to want to see, I'm going to read exactly what the contract said, and using your numbers, we're going to do the analysis in-house to see if the number is real. Because that one I can do. I can't measure, the utilities cost and the savings, the kilowatts that were used. I could go and do that. That's not the bulk of the savings. The bulk of the savings is this oil to gas exchange, and what this tells me was absent the price of natural gas getting cut in half, you'd be sure.
So,
Understood. We can certainly schedule time outside of here to sit down and reevaluate that.
so like, maybe come back when you have time to look at that and let us know.
Yeah, yes.
All right. Anybody else have anything? All right. Thank you so much.
Opposite answer I got when I asked the same question.
All right, Brian, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, Anita, when do we have to make the decision if we're gonna do this for another year? Or is it already made?
No, we have probably until the end of the calendar year to make up our mind. I mean, we didn't provide them notice to do this year's measurement and verification until it was February, I believe, of 2017. So we're good to go. But we do need to, make a decision in terms of, is it cost beneficial to us to continue to go through the $15,000 measurement and verification period to see that we're achieving a savings?
So according to what Mr. Crowley's saying, at this point, I'd say no, but obviously we'll wait for more details.
So for the school, you want to say anything about that?
I agree totally with your situation and the way they report it.
Yeah.
It's a moving baseline, there's nothing really to compare. As I mentioned to the administrative secretary, to the town administrator before, that I'm in agreement if we want to cancel at any time, it's not worth the $15,000 that it's costing us to go through this process.
Or when they don't come out with the right figures?
As far as Mr. Crowley said, they don't really come in and tweak anything anymore. I haven't seen these gentlemen until tonight, in the whole year, so so they're just giving numbers.
Roger, did you see this energy report before tonight?
I looked at it briefly.
You want to
the
step
other
up,
day.
please, just so you can,
Put it off.
you want to step up?
Roger,
Just-
want to okay?
Yeah, just step up at the table so they can.
I did look at it briefly the other
But
day.
you just got this same as us, you looked at it, you skimmed through, you haven't analyzed the numbers yet or anything like that, because that oil savings,
Right, as you said, they're comparing an artificial number to price per gallon of oil back then, and that's not the case. It's, you're an accountant, I'm an accountant. I can't see the rationale behind that, the way that they're doing it, but hey, it's probably time to sit down. and
So
look
if
at
we
it.
don't pay the 15,000, we don't get the guarantee anymore.
Correct.
There's nothing to prove that we would lose the guarantee.
But after 3 years, we have to do it every year to keep going? Or I thought after 3 years was
We
over.
had to do it consecutively, but we could, I believe it was a period of 10 years
10
that we
years,
could
that is
continue the
correct.
measurement and verification.
For 10 years,
But
$15,000.
it's at our choice to continue. If we feel it's no longer of value to us, if we see that there's a savings, that there is no additional tweaking of the system, so to speak, that needs to be done to bring those savings to us, then at the end of this conversation last year, we had said we would probably make the decision to not go ahead with the annual measurement.
Well, Roger said that they haven't been in all year to do anything.
Have they given you any more ideas of anything we can do to save?
No.
They haven't
That was
even
one of my questions, if you had opened it up on the deficiencies that we had on the front side, such as controls, upgrade, boiler replacement and stuff. Do they have any more recommendations for us to gain some efficiencies over these negative accounts in the school system? I assume that's where they're all with us probably, that was, you could ask
I mean,
that.
that could be, go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was just gonna say, the company that you have in helping you service your HVAC equipment, have they
Same
noticed anything?
company- Same company as you have.
Yep.
Nope, but also too, you are going through the process of the green communities, okay? They've been in to do some energy audits in our buildings too, so they could see some more efficiencies probably that weren't picked up with ABM when we did the project.
And don't forget,
It's
ABM
green.
wanted to do another project with us.
No, but as part of the Green Communities Act, we've had two separate entities come in to audit the building and look at energy, okay?
Would it be possible for you, those questions you didn't get to ask, to send those questions and let's just see what we get for answers?
Sure, I definitely would like that, because those accounts, there's five negatives? One, two,
Right.
three, four, 5 negatives on the front side.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do to gain efficiencies over these accounts, over these operations, so that we can get positive results on it?
I'd like to see
Because I
those
would
answers.
assume their intention was to get positive results on everything across the board that they did, because that's how they prorated the project to come up with the total cost savings to pay for it. So I can email that to the town administrator for you.
We'll get that up.
If I could just, on that, like boiler replacement, there's nothing more they can do. They replace the boiler. They just didn't save the money that they thought they could save.
Certain things there, that has to do with motors and energy that drives the boiler itself.
Might be able to
They
save us.
scoped it probably to save more than it actually did, one given point on it, but it's all, we're not changing any more boilers.
Right, I mean, I think they were just off on those numbers.
Right, but is there any kind
Anything we
of
can
motor
do.
reductions we can do to gain something there on it that's not costly? In other words, slow down the motor system that we use and so forth. I don't know, I'm not a tech person on that end of it, but.
So in reality, the difference is a negative 10,000, because we paid the 15,000 for the audit. That's not in here, right?
Correct.
Right.
So instead of a gain of 5,000, it's really a negative of 10,000. From the,
Correct.
but there's
If you're factoring the cost of the audit into the difference, that is.
but there has been a savings across the board on all this stuff. Yeah,
Definitely been a savings.
Right.
You know.
from what we paid 4 or 5 years ago to
Absolutely.
what we're paying today.
But it
is
doesn't meet the 218
I think.
when you take into account the cost of the M&B process.
And I don't doubt that the energy savings is $120,000,
Because of the price.
but the price got cut in half. We would have seen a big portion of that energy savings had we
Done nothing.
done nothing.
But
According, but I don't know if this guy is correct in what he just told me either, because he gave me the exact opposite answer last time.
But there's no way that they could have given us a guaranteed savings on what might happen with fuel.
No,
But
but
go, I think apples to apples.
last time,
You asked.
when we were talking about the project before we approved it, the finance committee specifically asked the question, so what you're telling us is if the price of oil gets cut in half, you're not gonna meet the savings, and the person said to me, yes, that's correct, we wouldn't meet our savings. Then when I asked the question when the price of oil actually did get cut in half, they said, oh, no, we're comparing therms to BTUs based on historic price. Now, he
Very
just came to me
confusing.
today and said, we're comparing the historic price of BTUs to the current price of therms. Which one is it?
Last year, they explained it to you, they use units of measurements.
Mhm.
This year, they explained it to you, they're using dollars to relate to those units of measurement. That wasn't mentioned last year.
And we asked them
I
specifically
asked
about
the
that.
same question.
I know you
And
did,
different answer.
I know you did, so that was.
I think we should look at
Yeah.
the original contract with them too, and see what they really guaranteed, not what they
It
say.
was based on units, not on dollars.
Right.
Right.
Because they did come back, they wanted to do a second project, and they said, we need to change some of the valves and some of the other stuff in the school. And that's what they wanted to do for the second project, and that's why we wouldn't even talk to them about it. You know, that was
Yeah.
a year ago or something.
But they wouldn't give us they wouldn't give us much guarantees on that work. They said
Yeah.
it could be done, but
Right.
they wouldn't
Right,
guarantee it.
right,
Right, no, because it wouldn't be enough savings that they could.
right. All right, we'll move on.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Expect to be here in this year, but that's all right.
Thank you.
Hey, Butch, come on up.
Mike Schrader from Tiger Bond is here, he's gonna give you.
Oh, okay.
No, you go.
Okay, let's fight on who's gonna go first.
So I'll open it up. We have Mike Schrader here tonight from Ty and Bond. As you know, he was the firm that we chose to do the sewer rate study for us. In 2010, we had our in-house financial director, Mike Daly, do a very comprehensive sewer rate study for us at that time. And at that time, we did do an adjustment in the sewer rates. He did a more superficial review of the rate structure in 2014, and at that point, he saw that we would have an increasing reliance on our reserves. And he said that it would make sense if we went through a sewer rate study again in 2017 to give serious consideration to doing rate adjustment for 2018. So we brought Ty and Bond and Mike on board, and he's been working with us over the past month or so. And tonight is the first time that we're going to be seeing the results of all the analytical studies that he's been doing with our staff and some options that we may have in terms of rate adjustment.
All right. You guys good with this? The wall? So, I'm Mike Schrader, I'm with Ty and Bond. I'm a project manager there, and I also rate services group. So, I want to go through some basics of what a rate study is, what we look at, how we do it, and if I'm too general, let me know. If I'm, you give me thumbs up or thumbs down or something, but I want to just explain the whole thing if you haven't gone through one before. So we're going to talk about just the rate study basics, our analysis, recommendations, and then customer impact. So one thing, I don't know if you guys are on LinkedIn, but Town of Ware is raising their rates up to 44% over, a number of years. But when you look at it, it's like $4 to $5, So I would say when we start to think about the numbers and look at the numbers, to wait until we get to the customer impact to really process that, because it only makes sense to talk about rate increases and percentages, but those tend to be sort of inflammatory, and people see that and say, oh my gosh. And then when you see what the impact is, it usually sort of dispels that. So anyway, your wastewater system, so you have a 17-year-old wastewater system. Prior to that, you didn't own a utility. So that was quite a transition for the town to become a utility owner. And even though it's a small town and a small system, you have 12 pump stations, which are, mechanically complex. And also, I might add, are roughly halfway through their service life. So that's going to start, everything's in a constant state of decay in water and wastewater. Everything you start to, as soon as you put it in place, it starts to age. And you have 32 miles of sewers, and I try to put that in context when I do these. So if you laid them end to end, it would go to Nashua. That just happened to be the first geographic place that meant 32 miles. So your wastewater system's operated as an enterprise fund. I'm sure you all know what that is, but that's really just an accounting tool to keep the costs and the expenses of the utility to the utility. So it operates almost like a business. And the basic premise of an enterprise fund is cost recovery. So all that cost stays in. Most people think they have to be revenue neutral, but you can actually run an enterprise system any way you want. You can have it supplement the general fund, you can have it be supplemented by the general fund. Most people go for sort of neutrality. So usually when we come in, we're in this situation where we're looking at expenses and revenue. The expenses are more than the revenue, and that's generally when we get a call. And most people think that this is what we want, right? That we want this balance. But actually what we want to do is put in some extra, some retained earnings. And we're going to talk a lot about that because that drives the whole process. So when we think about setting rates and setting utility rates, it's really just a big division problem. So on the top you have your expenses, and on the bottom you have your users. Now I don't say gallons or quantities there because it depends on the rate structure. So the rate structure is the device, the mechanism that divides those expenses equitably across those people, those users. And those are some of the things that I always look for. Are unintentional subsidies is probably the biggest one, where one person's paying for another person's service. And also like interclass inequities between different user types. So that is in a nutshell. So the top is all the expenses and everything it takes you to run your utility, and the bottom is all the people that use that utility or gain benefit from that utility. So when we look at the expenses for an enterprise fund, they really consist of three basic things: operating, debt, and capital. And at the end, we're going to have the slide that everybody always wants to see, is how do we compare to our neighbors. To really understand that, you'd have to understand each one of these for those communities, because it's like sort of going through your neighborhood and looking at, well, how come that guy drives a BMW and that guy drives a Toyota? We're all in the same neighborhood. You're kind of the same, but you're kind of not. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. In operating expenses, we have disposal fees, and I term that for lack of a better term, but that's the money you pay to dispose and treat your wastewater that you pay to Upper Blackstone. So that's a big part of your expenses, and it's largely out of your control. Labor use contract operations. They use Weston and Sampson to operate the system. So that's another big part of it, is that contract labor. And then we have the indirect costs. You have actually a very small staff, so there's a small amount of indirect costs that go to that. And energy, which is included in the operations contract. And so most of those are out of the town's control to some degree, you know, because Upper Blackstone's gonna charge you what they're gonna charge you. One of the active things that you're doing as far as talking about efficiencies is reducing the flow in the system. And we can talk a little bit about I&I if you want at the end, if you guys want to talk more about that. But that will help drive your costs lower because yeah, everybody's got some. Debt, you know, I look at debt as previous capital projects. In your case, it was building the system. So you're still on your first set of notes. And then capital is new projects, you know. And we're going to talk about the difference in the way we look at those. So when you look at what drives a rate increase, you know, why would people ever need to raise rates? The biggest one is your expenses are going up. Like I said, the cost of your disposal is about 40% of your operating expenses. So that's the biggest nut. And also, labor and benefits go up. And in this case, because you have contract operations, that includes them. That includes the contract operators. And they have built-in escalators in their contracts and that go up. Medical benefits tend to go up more than inflation. And then materials and equipment. So those all go up. Honestly, they go up a couple, 3% a year. You know, I don't have to tell you, the CPI hasn't really budged much. And that's probably what your contract with Weston & Sampson is based on, the CPI. Some things like medical costs have gone up quite a bit higher than that. On the other side is capital projects. And in your case, you have two projects that we're looking at. One is the infiltration and inflow project, and that's sort of still gelling what that's going to look like. And the town is working with Weston & Sampson, who are quite good at infiltration and inflow studies. And they're sort of taking a adaptive management approach where you're going to kind of explore and find and fix and explore and find and fix as you go. We've budgeted that at about $80,000 to $90,000 a year for 10 years. That's, you know, so it's important when we do these to put in placeholders. I'd rather put in something rather than nothing. And I guess this is a good time to say that this whole study is based on a look back of 5 years. So I look back at 5 years worth of all your expenses, your revenues, and the consumption or the usage in this case. And then we project forward 10 years. And I project forward 10 years, not because I think you should set rates 8 years from now based on what I'm going to tell you, but it just gives you a better feeling of the sustainability of the model versus, you know, I could show you something that looks great in 3 years and then year 4 it's going to crash because it's not working. So just keep that in mind. We're not suggesting that you set a 10-year rate schedule. This is something that you should monitor and adopt as you go and just kind of keep track as you go. So the infiltration and inflow consists of some modeling, flow monitoring that actually measure the flows and look at, you know, what is it at 2 o'clock in the morning versus what it is at 8 o'clock in the morning during wet and dry weather. Some TV inspections and then design improvements in construction eventually. The other thing, like I said, the pump stations are all halfway through their service life. So Weston & Sampson has given Butch a list of repairs that are needed there, and they monetize that list. So what we've done is we've taken that and brought that into the model, and I'll explain that, how we've done that. So I worked very closely with Leslie, bad with names. And, you know, we didn't, like, I don't provide financial advice, so we talked about how she would fund those projects, that kind of thing. We'll talk about that. But really what my goal is to look at the budgets and look at the revenues, look at the change in your consumption, what do we think that's going to be, and help you set rates that are going to maintain, not only cover your expenses, but maintain the reserves that you should have in your system.
Real quick, the 760 on the pumps?
Yep.
That's, you're saying they have the halfway useful life. Is that the expected expenditure over the next 10 years?
Depends on how you do it. That's what they summed as all of the needed improvements right now. So, just to cut to the chase, we talked about, you know, should we bond that? And, you know, Leslie's opinion was it's really not worth doing. So we looked at a 5-year ban. So that would fund the project. You could just do the project and be done with it.
So this isn't, this isn't the 17 years from now. This is to get back to brand-new condition, we need to put $750K into the system.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yep. So when I look back, nice thing about the walls, I can make it really big. We look at your actual chart of accounts, and these costs, the previous year's costs are based on the actuals. So it's the actual expended budget plus any encumbrances for that year. And then we met and we beat these numbers up pretty hard. I went back and forth with Leslie a number of times to make sure I was looking at things correctly. And then we look at the trends. So we're looking at, when we do this, what has it done before and what do we think it's going to do in the future to set escalation rates? So we can set a escalation rate independently for each line item if we want to. And you can see some of them are at 3, some are at 2.5, one's at 5, that's a healthcare one. So we can project the future. So the goal is to be as reasonably accurate in our projections as we can, keeping in mind, like the fuel oil discussion you just had, we don't know what the future is going to happen either. So we look back 5 years over the existing expenses, and we also do that for the sewer usage to see what did that look like, because the usage is your, I'm trying to think of a good name for this. It's your currency. It's the thing that you're selling, if you will, is a gallon of sewage or disposal to a resident. So you want to look at if the usage goes down, you're going to make less revenue. If the usage goes up, you're going to make more revenue. Sewer is generally more stable than water. Water rates, you think about weather. If you have a wet summer, people don't water their lawns, and then you lose, revenue. Sewer generally is steady. Surprisingly enough, your flow has actually gone up a little bit. Usually what I see everywhere is it's going down, and maybe because it's a newer system and people have been coming on. So we projected going forward almost flat with a slight increase, like 0.6% increase. And that's something that you're going to want to check in on in future years, because that affects all the curves for the numbers. So, like I said, we look at the trending, and when we project the future, so this is a little bit of a dichotomy, but we look at the previous data as actuals, okay? So that's what they call actuals, because that's the expended plus the any encumbrances. And then I take the FY18, I took the budget numbers. So the budget numbers are a little more conservative, and we projected off of that using the individual escalators that we selected. So the reason that we did that is it's just slightly more conservative because the numbers are a little bit higher. So your debt is about 20% of your expenses. It's holding steady around $360,000 a year. And so we don't project debt, we go right to the debt table. So I have a debt schedule that runs out your whole note, or a summary of the notes that, inclusive of the, not the discount, but you guys got subsidies, you got loan subsidies. So that new, we got this from your financial for Southwest, and we filled that into the model. Then we look at revenue, and revenue consists of 3 components. On the left is the rate revenue, which is usage and minimum charges. Now you have a fee, you have a minimum fee, so it's not really a charge. It's if you use less than $35 worth of sewer, they charge you $35. So that took a little bit of acrobatics to figure out that amount, because not everybody pays the $35. You know what I mean? It's not a fee. It's actually you get usage for that. And then other is what we call non-rate revenue, which is service fees, fines, interest, transfers, those sort of things. To look at your rate revenue, The residential tier 1 is your biggest user by 70%. The fee, it's a little bit of a misnomer. Tier 1, there is only one tier for residential, so that's all your residential usage. The commercial is the next biggest at 20%, so that's their tier 2 usage. Actually looked at the consumption. Most of the commercial accounts are into the second tier. So do you guys understand what tiers are? You use it's a volumetric rate, but at the first tier for a certain amount of usage is 20,000 gallons. It's at one rate. Then as you go into the second one, it's at a higher rate. So only 30% of commercial use was in tier 1. Most of it's into that second tier. And this is also includes, it's net, sort of net metering. So if people have deduct meters for irrigation, that's already been, zeroed out. So looking at your rate revenue versus your non-rate revenue, it's 70-30. What that's telling you is the rate revenue is what's on the sewer bills. So if you add up all the sewer bills, that's what rate revenue is. The non-rate revenue is interest on investments, fees, late fees, demands, that kind of thing. It's other revenue that you make that doesn't come from the sewer bills. So, sort of putting it all together, what I wanted to do is look at your pro forma and sort of walk you through this. So, your operating costs is this blue bar. Those go up roughly 3% a year, okay? The pump station ban is a $700,000 note at 4% going over 5 years. So that's this right here, that's that little bump in expenses. And then we looked at the I&I project as being what I call rate funded capital. So basically you're funding it out of cash. So you could, they would budget for it, but the way the model projects it, it's almost like it's coming out of reserves. So you're not going to bond that, you're just going to pay that as you go, or pay-go, a lot of people call it. So, and that's that, and that's about $80,000 a year. And the reason I'm speaking halting these is because I just know I'm going to end up pulling up the model. I can tell right now this is probably not enough detail. So then we look at your revenue under your existing rates, and you can see here that the revenue line is below the expenses, and that is partly due to a structural defect in the rates. Like it wasn't balanced to start with, which is why you do a rate study to look at this, and it's due to these increasing costs. And when you see, so there's your revenue. The next thing I'm going to add on is your retained earnings. So in this situation, you're at a negative cash flow because your expenses are more than your revenue. So what you see here, this orange line is your retained earnings. So it started out, and I got all these numbers with Leslie, and we beat them up. Because of that, you start going down, and you start to use your reserves, and that's what you've seen. You've been transferring from reserves every year. So what this is saying is that by FY20, you would have depleted your reserves, and you're not going to be able to I refer to it as crashing. So it crashes in year 20.
Does your retained earnings number take into account the set aside for capital too, or is that just the?
So it's, so there's a set aside for capital for what's the name of the Woodland Pump Station has a specific capital reserve set aside. I used that to reduce the capital cost of the Woodland Station. So I talked to Leslie about, what the value of that would be to be applied to it, and I applied that to it.
Okay.
So this is, and so in the model, it runs more like a checkbook. So as a municipal agency, you have to transfer into and out of retained earnings, and you have to go through that whole. So this is looking at it almost as a fund balance. So when I say it's funded by cash or by reserves, you would probably put in a budget item in that year for a project, But from the model's perspective, it doesn't matter. It's just taking it as cash. So what I'd like to see is a range. That line right there is, the rule of thumb is 2 months of capital costs are about 16%. So I set the bottom line there. And just because I thought we ought to set an upper line, I set it at about 50% of operating costs. I actually know some communities that do that. So that's the sort of band that we want to be in. And you can just sort of scrape along the bottom, or you can be somewhere in the middle, and that's how we set the rates. So, so this is my first attempt. I built in the ability to use 3 different alternatives. So there's a lot of different ways you can go, and I know that I understand that you gave feedback that you'd like to see steady rate increases, and I'll show you a version of that. What I usually show first is what it'll take to maintain your reserves, you know, in the straightest path possible. So what you see here is a 10% increase in FY18. Now, FY18's already started, so we're into the first quarter. So I reduced the revenue in FY18 by 1 quarter. Not the revenue increase. So you're only going to get 3/4 of an increase. So we accounted for that in the model. And so what you see there is that 10%, that starts to head up your revenue. And it slows this down. And I can actually show it to you live. If you change that to 8%, this kind of, the whole curve rotates. And then what you see here is, this is the result of that band ending. So it shows it going back up higher, and basically you're accumulating reserves. The DOR is pretty friendly to communities building reserves. They'd like to see that. I would suggest also, I suggest this to everybody, to have a policy, because that makes it easier for you as decision makers to say, well, we're adhering to our policy that we set, versus, well, how come you're doing this versus how come you're doing that? It's always more defendable to have a reserve policy, and also sometimes even a debt policy, like how you're going to fund different projects, whether you're going to try to do SRF projects, whether you're going to try to do, you know, your own. So this is the first version. A second version was as close as I could come to a steady rate increase. And, you know, when I'm doing these, I sort of think it's like pay me now, pay me later, even Steven is more or less how they work out. So this one is trying to be just a steady rate increase. And you can see it actually goes below the minimum here in FY24. And again, this is a projection, so you don't have to decide right now on this. You can decide, you know, on that, and then monitor for the next couple of years and see, you know, did the flow come in like we thought it would come in? Did the expenses trail the way we did? Some of the expenses are significantly under, some of them go over. One of the unknowns is your disposal cost, because you share in the capital projects of Upper Blackstone. So if, you know, if they get hit with a new permit or a big upgrade, then that could affect your costs in the future. We just based it on, you know, what we know now and what we've seen, and you are a community, so you're part of the board there. So that's what they're telling them right now. And then I did a third one. Sometimes people, you know, this is like death by paper cut. You know, it's just a 1,000 little rate increases. This is more of just if we wanted to do it in the least number of steps. So again, you know, and I'm here as long as you guys want to be here. I don't know what else you have here on your agenda, but I did want to just show you this, because this will take away some of that that expression. I just saw that pain on your face. So based on the actual numbers, so all the rate comparisons I'm going to show you are based on West Boylston's data. Okay, your average customer, an average residential customer, because those are the people that are generally the most reactionary. So under your you know what, I'm gonna jump to my model, because I realize, I swear I put that in there. Oh. What? One second. This will be worth it, I promise. Okay. So we look at the quarterly bill. And your existing estimated quarterly bill is about $113. That's right now what people are paying. That first scenario A, it would go from 113 to 124 and a quarter. The next one would be 119, 124, you know, so on. That big jump goes from 113 to 141. But then we look at here, what is the increase in the quarterly bill? Okay, so under that first scenario, the first 10%, so that'd be $11. So that's 11 total dollars. We're not talking percentages in somebody's bill for a quarter. The highest one would be $28, but you notice there's no more coming after that. I mean, I just look at the first 5 years. I think that's what most people are looking at. Versus this one is $5 to $6. And then if we just scroll down a little bit more, so West Boylston is just big enough. If you have a really small town, it's painful if you need any capital, because there's just not enough. It's economy of scale is really what you see here. So when I look at the total annual cost, when I was doing these and trying to explain to people like what these different alternatives look like, I decided to just add up the total dollars over a 5-year period. It's no rule of thumb. It's just something that I do because I think it's useful, because what you see is it's almost the same money. You know, over a 5-year period, you get to the same place, just different ways. So here again, now we have an increase in total yearly cost for somebody. So under that scenario A, they would go up $45 in a year. And not until FY21, they would go up another $50. And I'm not here to say, well, I can show you affordability, but I'm not here to say that $50 isn't a lot of money, because if you asked me for it, I wouldn't have it right now. But, you know, for a year, it's not as painful as 25% sounds. So when we talk about affordability, the Clean Water Act, bringing back to 1970 with the Indian with the tear and all that, those commercials, the EPA forced, you know, or actually funded upgrades to wastewater plants across the country. And at the same time, they enabled the Clean Water Act. So a lot of discussion across the country about what is an unreasonable burden to people that have to bear these. You guys are in pretty good shape. If you have CSOs and you have, you know, Fitchburg, they're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to remedy their system. They came up with an indicator, and you can talk for hours about whether this is rational or not, that 2% of MHI for sewer service is considered, it's sort of the threshold of starting to be an economic burden to people. So we looked at your MHI, which is 81,000, which frankly is the highest one I think I've seen. Usually I'm looking at these at like 40,000, 38,000.
Yeah.
So you're a 0.5% under, well, up to 7.7%. So I would say that that's a very light burden. And again, I don't want my bills to go up. I don't want gas to go up. But, you know, from that perspective, well, I guess it is what it is. I mean, that's the net impact. Now, I feel like I just went through that really fast. This is that, because we got at least one accountant on the board, this is, we actually, what I call the dashboard of the model is where you look at your decisions, and we calculate the revenue. So I look at the past, I look at the revenue you collected, but I don't count that. I calculate the revenue based on the rate structure, either existing or proposed, the number of customers projected, and the usage projected. And then for the 2 years, for the first 2 years, I use existing data and I calibrate it, and I see how close does my revenue calculation come to the committed revenue, which is literally, if you added up every sewer bill, and again, I don't mean to speak down to anybody, I just don't know how familiar you are with the bill paying process, but every quarter, the sewer department sends over to the town, you can expect this much revenue. And then you don't get it all, it goes to liens, and you go tax collection and all that stuff. But I compare, how did we do, how do we come versus that? So this is it right here. This is the commitment revenue. It's actually FY 15 and 16. For 15, I was negative 1%, and for 16, it's 2.3%. I like to see it under 5, and anywhere under 3 is reasonable error. And why I say that is there's abatements, there's, meter read errors, there's a lot of, that's a big jump to go from the, gosh, I'm just trying to think of how many, from 2,399 bills times 4, there's a lot of little, nothing ever closes perfectly. So that, to me, says that the consumption data was accurate, is really where it all comes down to, because the rates are the rates, right? I mean, the rate part is, we know what that is. So this is really just telling me, how accurate my revenue projections are, because that's what it's based on. And I started doing that because if I had a margin of error of 10% and I tell you to raise your rates by 10%, what are we doing? I mean, it's going to be the same thing you just talked about. Is that really a reflective thing? So we kind of keep banging on that. And Carrie's not here, it's probably a good thing, but I drove her crazy looking at data, and Leslie as well. So I know you didn't ask, but I'm going to show you this anyway. So this, what the model does is it takes the expenses, and we calculate your rate revenue, and we project the non-rate revenue based on what it's been. And I usually project it flat, and I have to say Leslie was very conservative too. So there's levels of conservative built into here. But just to show you how this works and how it sort of plays on its cumulative. So if I made this first rate increase 5%, then you see that's what happens. The curve drops down in those future years. So it's sort of a balance from a implementation and having to tell your neighbors at the grocery store why the rates went up a certain percent. Less is more. To go less up front is better, right? Oh, it's only going up a little bit, or we're putting it off a year. From a mathematical perspective, you hit it hard the first year because everything else bases off that. Once you establish that, if you raise it, 10%, 20% that first year, then a 3% gives you a lot more bang for your buck because it's riding on top of that previous 10 or 20%. That's just the mathematical nature of, of doing that. So what else? To show you, we looked at usage. This is your historical consumption. So your data comes from the water district. They provide the data, and Carrie and the nice lady over at the water district share data, and she gets it, uploads it into her system, and it goes from there. So we got that data, actually both places, and we looked and we saw, an actual 0.25% change in consumption per year. And that scares me, because I'm not going to project it as going to go up 0.25% every year, because you wouldn't think that makes a difference. But if I change this from 1.006 to just 1, see what that did? It drops down because that's revenue, that's less revenue. So it's sort of a balance. If I'm too conservative, if I'm overly aggressive with the growth, it's gonna show you money that's never gonna come. If I'm too aggressive the other way, it's gonna drive up harder rate increases than you may not need because of the usage. So it's as much of an art as it is a science. And then, you know, like I said, we project all that going out. Revenues, we looked at, this is a better example of all your non-rate revenue. So sewer use tax lien revenue, demand fees, that kind of stuff, connection charges, capital contributions. And then we calculate under each scenario, based on your rates, what we think the revenue is going to be. So. I'm afraid to ask, but do you have any questions? I've seen your ability to ask questions.
I have just one question.
Can you go over it again?
Scenario 2, where you
Yep.
have the small increases
Yep.
going every year. In FY '24, when the band's paid off, what would our, in your projection, what would the low point on our RE as a percentage be? When it, it dipped.
Oh, all right, I'm sorry.
You
Right
have
here.
it.
Yeah, it's 27%.
So that, and when, and.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, you said
The,
23%.
and that's the one, you were talking, the baseline RE you said is 2 months.
16.
Is 16. So we don't actually dip below that, your baseline in the.
No,
That's the one, and that's the one where we do the 55555 or whatever, 5.
no, the 555
That's the one I'm talking-
is
yeah,
right
that one.
here. So FY '24,
So we're 15?
yeah, why did those become dollars? Yeah, you're at 10%, 7%.
Okay, so FSO would be down to 7%. Okay, that's my only question.
The $750,000 we got.
That's it? That's all you got?
You did a great
Come
job.
on. I saw those other guys, I was like, whoo!
Oh, well, I didn't have to ask any questions, you explained everything. That was great.
Wow.
The $750 we gotta spend on repairs in next,
Oh, that's here. All right, so I want to show you if you thought that was good. So we look at that. So that's it was 700,000. This first dollar amount for Woodland Street was actually estimated at 194,000, but we have at least $100,000 in the debt reserve. The capital reserve that we can apply to that. So you're an accountant, Mr. Crowley. The easiest way for me to do this in my model was just reduce the budget cost of it.
I like it.
Because then it just, rather than trying to figure out another revenue source. So we have the ability to, the debt, we used a 5-year band because that's as much as you can do it. We have the ability to just stretch that out to 20 years if we wanted to and change the percentage. So we look at all of these things to sort of balance this out. And then here we're funding this is just by cash. So we, and this is a rough estimate,
The 750 is a rough estimate.
No, the 750 is a,
That's to bring the system up to,
the 750 is I won't say it's rough, it's a middle of the road. It's what your operators actually estimated for the pump stations, broken down by pump station. And they enumerated new pumps, new controller, this one needs signals.
so after that 5 years of work, we foresee there's not gonna be a lot of,
Honestly,
That was meant to address the 10-year capital needs of the pump stations. We asked them if we were putting together a capital plan for the pump stations, in the next 10 years, what would that capital plan include? And that's what they gave us.
What I didn't see was sort of building envelope, so at the end of that, I would expect roofs and driveways and fences and, you know,
So that's the end of 10 years.
yeah, I mean, I didn't look at the pump stations, that's what they
Right.
gave us, but when I just noticed that there wasn't, you know, maybe they're still in good shape, I haven't been out to them.
You're
but-
just talking about mechanical inside the.
Yep.
The other thing that comes into play in that is that they did say that, you know, some of those items are more urgent than others. And I think, Butch, I think it was what, the Thomas Basin?
Yeah.
Was one of the more urgent ones. It's one of the smaller ones, $45,000, I think, if I remember correctly. But that's probably one that should be done much sooner than some of the others. And we look to see, you know, should we do this as, you know, we're borrowing through a ban, or, you know, notes, State House notes, or should we do it as, you know, the rates, meaning, you know, to assign some money annually from the rate revenues to put toward these projects? And we figured that, at least in this scenario, let's make the assumption that they all need to be done sooner rather than later, and put it, and that's why we developed it this way.
Mr. Chairman? So the prices that are estimated up there, it says 2017,
They're in today's dollars.
in today's dollars. So if we don't do those,
You'd have to add escalators.
then it would have to add something in, because, I mean, 2017, you know, time's running out. So I'm assuming those will go up. And I see
So-
a real high dollar one, number 2. How-
Yeah.
Like, how do you, at that point, let's say we're not gonna get them all done. Do you recommend that we go by the one that's most urgent or the highest dollar? Because if it's the highest dollar, we're gonna save more if we do that now versus escalation prices in the future.
Based on the feedback that Weston and Sampson was providing to us, I think it needs to be a combination of the most urgent ones. I mean, when we're talking sewer pump stations, we're talking about if there's a failure,
Yeah.
it could be very problematic, a huge
Right.
liability for the town. So I think we need to look at doing those as being the top priority projects to complete. And then we can look to cost being a factor in terms of would we like to get that cost done at the lower today's prices versus push it out in future prices.
Okay, that one just jumps out because that's the highest, double, triple some of the others. That's why I was questioning the
To your-
261.
Question on the money. So this is maybe not that clear. The cost year is 2017, the implementation year is 2020, and they're escalated at 3%.
Okay,
So if you watch it, that goes out, it goes to 177,
gotcha.
goes to 182.
Okay.
What happens if you make the ban at 2% instead of a 4%? And when I say what happens to my 7% of retained earnings number? That's the one I'm keying in on. Oh, but I'm looking, I want to see the.
Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong one.
increase yeah, that one. So now we're up to,
10%.
okay.
But again, keep in mind, that's 6 years from now,
Oh, I understand.
you know, so it's,
So what we're trying to do is to determine what would be the most appropriate option to consider for a rate increase for, you know, the next 3 to 5 years, roughly. Had been advised to us that this is something we want to do at least every 5 years, to take a look. I mean, the numbers that Mike's put together for us gives us 10-year projections, but as he said, the accuracy is more reliable when you're looking at the first 5 years. So, he's developed these 3 scenarios for you, one of which was your preferred scenario that we discussed at our workshop earlier this year, that you were hoping to do smaller, more frequent rate increases rather than infrequent, very large increases. But you'll see that, the differences in these 3 alternatives that Mike is proposing, that at the end of the 5-year period, they pretty much all end up being the same cost to the homeowner or to the ratepayer. So I guess it's, in some respects, it's a political decision as much as it is a financial decision to decide which approach would you rather take on this.
Yeah, it's all perception, what it's gonna, you tell somebody's gonna be 10% or 20% or something like that. It's a
As
big
Mike
thing.
had said, when you're talking, a 10% increase right off the top, that starts to raise alarm, but then when they actually look at the dollar impacts that it would be to their particular bill, it's not as concerning.
How
Yeah,
difficult?
but at the same time, if you increase every year, that's, people will be saying, every year tax goes up.
There's a certain, so one of the interesting discussions on this, and frankly, at this point, I wish I had become an economist, a behavioral economist, because it's pretty interesting. But, there's the elasticity, so if you double the price of gas, people use less gas. Water and sewer are considered to be pretty inelastic, but frankly, one of the things that happens is you raise it, say you just did 20% or something, people get mad, a year later, they forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, it goes away versus, geez, another, here we go, they're raising them again, so it's sort of hard from your perspective to,
Increase every year.
kill me now or kill me later. It's
Will
not.
2 or 3% be as noticeable over time?
Honestly, I don't remember what my last water bill was. I mean, I know it's not enough that I worry about what my next water bill is gonna be, because we don't, I guess, use that much water, but, it's the,
I think you'd know it if it went up 10%.
Of course you do.
I think you'd say, wow, my water bill. Then you'd probably look back and say, hey, what did I pay last time? This seems like it went up.
so if your water bill went up from $113 to $124 in 3 months,
That's the 10%.
I don't know if I would feel, if I would.
That's the 10%
Yeah, that's
increase
10%. The highest one was the, and I just did it for an illustration. I mean, we can tweak those and, do it whatever you want. It's very dynamic.
But the other one's 567, it would go up, but that would be probably every year.
Yeah, that's every quarter. So that's your quarterly bill increase. So,
Oh, the 1124 is quarterly also?
yep, so that means that you have to multiply it by 4, so that's $22 a year.
Yeah, instead of 40.
So yeah, at some point, I feel like that Sally Struthers, and for 30 cents a day, you can save, because that's what you're doing. You're just slicing and dicing this and showing it different ways.
How hard is it, from an administrative standpoint, both man hours and costs, which I know they're related, to actually implement a rate increase within the system?
Harry would tell you it's painful.
I think I think the impact more is the public response. So anytime there's a rate increase, we are going to see an increased number of people calling the DPW sewer office and saying, why has my sewer bill gone up? So already, the staff over at DPW is anticipating that the calls are gonna come in with much higher frequency when that first adjusted bill goes through. So in that respect, having less frequent bill increases would be better. I'm more concerned about whichever rate we choose, that we have good rate information out there for people in advance of the rate change being done, so they can understand why we've made the decisions that we've made and what the impact will be to them personally. In the same way that when we were doing some voter education to help voters understand the cost of the police station project or the senior center project, we were trying to give them information as to what it might be in terms of impact to their bill, to their real estate bill. I'm hoping we can do the same thing with this increase, so to show them that, perhaps the increase to them would only be that $5, per quarter, or that $11 per quarter. I think if we can do that, get information out there well in advance, the impact on staff after the rate increase goes through will be less.
So it's more dealing with the public hardship than it is the physical.
The actual
within the system.
logistics of changing it on the bill itself is small. It's more the public response to it afterwards that has been of concern.
When are you looking for an answer from us?
I was hoping that we could have a public hearing and do a formal vote on this at the first meeting in October.
Now, what's been your practice, other towns? Has it been all over the board?
Oh, I didn't show you the slide. As far as what?
Just how they go up on their rates?
It really is.
All over the place.
So one of them, So I was doing one in a town that has a mayor, a form of government, and one of the councilmen who, you know, what I had heard anecdotally was he was, you know, sort of trying to skewer him, said, well, what would it be if we did it all at once? You just want one. And we looked at it, and I looked at it, I'm like, you know, it's actually a great idea. It really worked out better. And they ended up going with that. So it just depends. You want to just tear the Band-Aid off, you know, and just do it in one, and then know that there won't be any more for a couple years, or do you want to do them in steps? Sometimes it's, if there's an election coming up, you don't do, you know, this is where the people side come in. But you wanted to know where you were relative to everyone else. I just want to see how I can make this bigger. So what we did here was we looked at all of the communities in the same Upper Blackstone treatment plant, the other member communities, and you last did your rate increase in 2010, so we went back and we used the rates from 2010 and your consumption data. So this is if those people picked up their house and they were in that town, what it would, so it's apples to apples where we could. And I looked at what they were in 2010 and what they were now and what it increased. Now, I don't know, I mean, Auburn might have done 5 rate increases, they might have done 1, I don't know how they got there. I don't know how Holden actually, so Holden went up 1%.
Wow.
Millbury went up 51%. Rutland 13, Worcester 40, Cherry Valley 81%. So you're showing here it's 0, but if we made it to 10%, excuse me while I just back to this. So your cost would be, you know, let's call it $500. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking going up like $40, right? So you're still gonna be under this line, under this 600 line. And that's where you're gonna compare. You're gonna be more than Holden, more than Rutland, less than Worcester, less than Cherry Valley, less than Millbury.
But we don't know if they have larger systems and more households.
Yeah, so Worcester obviously does.
Right, Worcester does, right.
And you don't know how old their system
That's
is,
really not an apples to
Or
apples.
what their balance sheet looks like either.
what their
right?
balance sheet look, you know, we do, so Ty and Bond does a rate survey as well. It's out right now. You should have got an email asking all the communities in Massachusetts for rate information so we can compile it. And I've looked, I spent some rainy Saturdays trying to figure out a correlation between cost and something. And really the only one I could find, I thought it'd be debt, I thought it'd be, you know, the size. The only thing I found a good correlation to was size of the system. So the size of the system and cost of sewage or cost of water service definitely correlates very well. Everything else was a crapshoot. I thought, you know, surely it's gotta be, you know, debt and their operating costs and all, it's really hard to find, you know, why is, so the answer to the unasked question is, are we charging too much? You know, and that's a very hard question to answer. You know, and so what this isn't is, you know, sort of an efficiency study or a, you know, that kind of thing. You do use contract operations, so they have it in their best interest to reduce cost, you know, over sometimes what a community would themselves. So, I don't know, everybody always asks for this and we always show it, but it's hard to make meaningful sense of it.
Most people, residents are gonna just say, hey, what's your water bill? When they call their friend, they're not gonna say,
Yeah,
you know, what's your water bill and how's their debt and how's their,
right.
I mean, they're gonna just,
Right,
you know,
right,
just like
right.
taxes.
Geez,
No
my-
one,
my
you know,
uncle
they just wanna
lives
know
in-
how much per thousand. They don't wanna know any
Yeah.
other information.
My uncle in Holden only pays this, yeah.
That's exactly right.
And then maybe they don't have as many, pump stations, you know, or maybe they don't have as much operating costs.
I think we have the most pump stations.
You have a lot, yeah. Actually, Boylston, what we learned, West Boylston has a little bit of everything. You guys have a lot of complexity for a small town.
Anyone else have any questions for him? Great job.
That was really good
Really good.
presentation.
Jeez, I was starting nervous for nothing.
We'll talk about you after, though.
Wait till you leave.
So the next steps for me is I owe you a written, like a memo that summarizes this, and that I'd be more than happy to come and do a presentation. You know, the people that come to those are the people that actually pay my salary, not, I mean, you guys pay through your water bill, but I'm happy to spend as much time as I need to with people so they understand it, because that's, you know, I think they have that right.
Great.
Can I just ask if, do you have anything to add to this? No?
All right, let me just get out of here.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
When you send us the write-up, is this presentation included with it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, the PowerPoint would be a good general summary to help people.
Oh,
understand.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
How long did it take you to build the spreadsheet?
You know, I've built it, so you're gonna laugh. Every one I try to make improvements to, and right now I have 4 of these going on, and I retro go back and I change them.
It's good.
But I don't know if I should tell you this, but I started like, usually it's called a version 1, version 2. I started like Iron Man, you know, the Mark 5 suit, the Mark 6 suit. So I'm trying to, you know, build in better features and better functionality. And we're all Excel geeks. We're engineers.
I like it.
So,
Of course you do.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank
yeah,
you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you ever wanted to roll up your sleeves and come play with it, I'd be more than happy to meet you.
No, I don't like that one. Spreadsheets to play with.
Yeah, you got ESCO to figure out.
That one big one. All right,
All right, sorry, let me just get out of here.
we're gonna pass on the 500, 560, I think.
565. We're passing over that?
We're gonna pass over 560.
On the Prospect
Yeah.
Street, yep. But you want to sit up here or get other up?
First item I have is
Newton Street drainage.
Newton Street drainage recommendation. We had 12 bidders, you have the list up there, I believe. And Borges Construction out of Ludlow was the low bidder, and they are qualified. LEI vetted everybody, and I'm recommending Borges for the project at $350,986.59.
It's incredible difference between the low bidder and the high bidder.
What did we estimate internally?
It was right around 400,000, and we got 420 Chapter 90 money for a little bit of a cushion.
So this is for the upper Newton, right?
This is for Newton Street drainage. Just for your knowledge, I just got a new ledger from the Chapter 90 Mass DOT, and we have $294,757 left after this project and after the Newton Street
Parking.
library parking. So this is money I'll use for, some of it for paving this year.
So everybody's aware, it goes from Goodale Street to Prospect Street.
Yeah, roughly, yep. Right. But we picked up another 94,000. We cleaned up some of the Chapter 90 old projects, like the Malden Street from last year. There was 90,000 left over, so we picked that up. So we're up a little over 90,000 for what we were the last time I talked to you.
Do you hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Borges Construction contract in the amount of $350,986.59 for the Newton Street project.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
See it, see it.
Do I need to do the goods and services?
Yeah, we'll need to do up the contract.
You have it. Do I need to vote it?
The-
Paving, street paving?
Have we had the Board of Selectmen vote the smaller contracts for this, the unit pricing for the various contracts in the past? Or those just have gone through the town administrator, I believe?
We usually get a list and then we
I'm not sure.
vote them all, I believe. For all the,
Streets.
Yeah, for the different types of supplies or work that we have done.
I can recall
pricing.
seeing that list
Yeah.
at a meeting in the past, so.
I remember seeing it, but did we actually, was it being presented to us as these are the contracts, or did we vote on them?
I thought it had the prices and everything.
They
like
Well,
that.
they're all, I mean, there's really not much, it's the lowest price.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
is.
not like we can,
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
we
actually
just vote
$5 a ton cheaper than last year. which
So
is
we
ama-
could put
which
that
is
on the
amazing.
agenda for the September 20th meeting?
Yeah, I'd like to get that done
Okay, we'll do that.
ASAP.
Good.
Okay, library parking. We have 4 bidders that have taken out plans. The bid is actually tomorrow at 10:30. And once it's bid, and we'll have to award that too in that meeting.
We're gonna do that the 20th also?
What's that?
We're gonna do that the 20th also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll know tomorrow who the winning bid is. Route 140 sidewalks / poison ivy. Do you have those pictures?
Looks like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I did is I took some pictures, I talked to the DCR, they were a little unsure what I was talking about, so I took some pictures, sent them to them. We own the road, we own just behind the guardrail, so the poison ivy is technically on both of our properties. I had somebody coming in to spray a little bit around the back of the school, what we do every year, and I suggested I bring this down to them, the spray company down there, and do that area, but they went out and took care of it themselves, because it is right next to the reservoir. So they took care of it, and they told me they're going to, they went back to their people, and they're gonna try and find a permanent solution amongst themselves, because it's actually, they're worried about that, so. The mowing of the police station, the detention pond, that shouldn't be a problem. We'll either weed whack that, or that is actually gradual enough that we can actually do that with a hand mower.
We really can't do anything on it until we get the approval from the planning board and the conservation board. So
Right, I saw
it's
that
something we
email
can
today.
act on
Yep.
for a little while, a
Yep,
little bit.
I saw that email today, yeah. And I'm kind of curious as to what level they want to keep it, because it is a retention pond, and Tony did make a point of saying that it's the way it should be. So I don't know if they even want us to treat it, to mow it, but we can look at that.
That's right, we want to see what the planning board wants to say about it.
Yeah, I think it would look better mowed, obviously. The last one is fall DPW improvements. And Anita came down, and we went through the whole yard, and made up a list of things that would make things look better. You see the list. I don't know if you want me to go through it at all. My goal is to try and get all of this stuff done by the end of FY18, except possibly the paving of the area. Our driveway is terrible. We have potholes everywhere, and it's just horrible. So I got a price of $115,000 from a local contractor just to get a price, and I put it into the capital committee to see what they think about it. I actually did it for this fiscal 18, but I'll change it to 19, because
Okay,
it should be FY19.
okay.
But these are things you'll be seeing in the near future.
Why does it cost so much to do like a parking lot compared to, I know it's a lot cheaper to do a road.
It's just because that is so bad that you gotta pulverize that and pave it.
Okay.
And we might even get tied up a little bit in the MS4 regulations because of the runoff. We may have to do a couple of retention bonds in the corners here and there, so I have to look at that too, but, because we're so close to the reservoir, they may want something, or some kind of a drainage structure with a
Is there anything in
water
there now?
separator. What's that?
Is there anything there now?
We have a couple of catch basins, but I doubt if they're more than just that. So, that's all I have.
Anybody else have anything else, Butch?
But if we could just, and we've talked about it a few times, look at maybe now for next year, what we could do to the lawn outside here. I know watering's the biggest issue.
Yeah, no, that's such.
I don't know if you can look into if the sprinkler system work, the water system.
I understand there is a sprinkler system here, but what I was told was when the building was first done, it was decided not to continue it.
I
So
think
it's
part-
buried.
I think what happened when they extended the parking lot, they ripped up the lines.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah,
That's
that's,
my understanding as
so
well.
if you want us to look into replacing that,
Yeah,
Those
just to give us an idea, because, the lawn all this year,
yeah, it's,
and like I say, in a year that even I could have a nice looking lawn, ours was
no,
dirt
it's
all
not,
year,
it's not good, I apologize for that.
so.
So, is it the best time to reseed it? receive the lawn?
Yes, now is the best time.
Yeah, but I mean. if
Or
we're-
actually do to fertilize everything too.
But you have to water it if you're gonna reseed it.
Actually, the summer would be pretty good with the water without it.
No, I'm just
But yeah,
saying.
you should, yeah, definitely,
Okay.
especially
Just-
around like the sidewalk where those edges are, where it's,
Yeah.
it's all weeds.
We can just look into it maybe.
Yep.
That's fine, thank you.
Anybody else?
I know, Butch, that you talked about Newton Street. Do we have an idea of when it might be?
Newton Street schedule, I actually have that.
Just to remind the people, because I know you've been doing some connections up there and, you know, working it, but.
Yeah, that's actually
now
the,
that-
the water district has been trying to get
Doing
ahead
that.
of me. So I don't have to rip
So I'm
that.
assuming that will be all completed before this is started?
Yep, the schedule is, right now, we're gonna start on the 20th of September, and we should be complete by the 20th of November.
Okay, so will you, like, before the 20th or so, will you be putting signs up just to give, because that street
Put
gets.
on the town sign if you want, maybe
Yeah,
on the website.
that gets used.
Post
A
notices
lot.
on the doors.
Yeah,
Could also
of the
potentially
residents.
do a limited reverse 911 to those
Yeah,
residents in that
yes,
area.
actually, I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea, because between commuters and town people, it gets
I've been getting a
used.
lot of calls from the residents up there, they're anxious to get that done.
Yeah,
How long do you expect it to be closed to through traffic?
It won't be closed to through traffic anytime when we're not working there.
but when you are working, it will be.
Yeah, probably during
And I'm
the day.
assuming you'll start early in the morning, so
Well, we won't
people.
start before 7, because we'll hear about it if we do.
Right, but I'm just thinking people going to work.
Yeah, well, they won't be, nobody will be restricted from getting to their home.
Right, but a lot of people use that to commute to Holden.
Well, they
Yes.
probably won't be able to do
But they
that.
can easily, there's an easy.
Yeah, they
path
can
to
just
get
come
around.
down and
Yeah.
use Central
It's just
Street.
there's gonna be a little more traffic going the other way.
Right.
They're just
What
gonna
we
stay
might
off
want to do
it
is
for a little.
suggest detour routes that we can place on our website.
Yeah,
Yeah.
plus it's only a month, so it's gonna be
Right.
short-term,
Gonna be-
and it's only during the day. At
Right.
night they'll have access,
I'm just thinking if we could get it out there before,
minimize it, yeah, okay.
it'd be a little less headache for people.
Maybe we can put a notice in the new item.
Is that a newspaper?
All right, anybody else? Thank you so much, appreciate it. All right, new business, confer with the hiring of the following production assistants for WBPA TV, grade 2, Clifford Demula Shea, Neil Tupper, and Haley Bryn.
Make a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Recognize the acceptance of the following donations to the Bandstand Committee and to approve expenditures of these funds for general purposes. $150.18 from August 13th, $137.70 from August 20th concert, $200 donation from Vignali family, $240.01 in free will donations from August 27th concert, and $250 sponsorship from Less Refrigeration.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right.
Aye.
Anita, Town Administrator report?
Okay, thank you. So in the town administrator's report, the top thing is preparation for the October 16th town meeting. The deadline for the money articles was last Friday, and I've already begun drafting the warrant. Money articles will include some of the standard articles that we have in prior years, bills, some minor budget fixes that might be needed, as well as any CPA fund appropriations. We'll be looking to have an article in to approve year one costs for the INI study, as we've had some references about that again this evening. And you'll see capital articles for the replacement fire truck and the replacement ambulance. The replacement fire truck is intended to be a borrowing that replaces borrowing that had been done for a previous road drainage project, and the ambulance would be using would be using the ambulance revenue fees. So there would be no impact on the tax rate for either of those. The deadline for general warrant articles is tomorrow, September 7th. And so far, we have article asking to adopt the state's energy stretch code as part of our application under the Green Communities designation process. We'll be doing voter education about what that means. We do need to apply for the Green Community designation at the end of October. So we've been working methodically trying to make sure that we can meet each of the criteria that it requires. We're also have an article that's being considered by the planning board, which would decrease the weight limit of trucks that are allowed to park in residential areas overnight, and that's under discussion with the planning board. It's also been mentioned that the Economic Development Committee was looking to see if we should amend the sign bylaw to allow more flexibility in the electronic signs for our local businesses. And I know John Hadley could give more detail on that.
We had two things we talked about, being able to put a picture on the signs, which we can't do now, can only do digital, and to fade in and out. Right now, you can only do it abruptly from one sign to another, you can't fade in and out. And those are two changes. The amount of signs that are coming, and I'm sure there's gonna be a lot more coming, we have some changes gradually over the years and stuff like that, but that's a good start. And Chris and I from the Economic Development, we had a meeting about that, and that's what they decided.
And the planning board representative is gonna bring it back to the planning board to show them, see what they have to say.
Okay.
Now, is there articles for the cable access? We had some, I sent you an email in regards to some that we talked about. Is that not gonna?
So I do have placeholder
Oh,
articles.
that's what I mean,
Yep.
okay.
So we do know that they're under the, what we call our budget fix article. There'll probably be some adjustments between the expense lines and the payroll lines for the public access TV operating budget. As you recall, this was the first year that the operating budget for the cable TV program was built into the main operating budget of the town. The other thing is that the PEG board is looking to ask town meeting to authorize use of some of their reserve fund, their savings account, so to speak, to do particular equipment improvement projects in this building. One of those involves changes to the connections of equipment to allow that two meetings could be aired concurrently. Right now, we have a choice that if we have two meetings going on at the same time, we have to choose which one to do live broadcast. The other one has to be recorded and aired later. So by doing that type of equipment modification, we'd be making those improvements. So you'll see those articles in the draft warrant as well. And I'll be bringing the draft warrant article to the board at the September 20th meeting, and we'll be having the FinCom be present that night as well. Under the regional animal control consideration, I'm continuing to meet with a variety of different communities to see what level of interest there might be out there. At this point, it appears that the most viable option would be to develop a regional collaboration with the town of Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury is considering offering to act as lead community for communities such as West Boylston and Berlin. And I do have a meeting with that group on September 25th to discuss the concept in more detail. So I'm hoping that by one of our meetings in October, I'll be bringing something forward to you in terms of a draft intermunicipal agreement on that. I wanted to let the board know that the installation of the new test wells at the landfill will be happening over the next few weeks. You may recall that DEP mandated that we will be adding additional test wells at the landfill since we found the 1,4-dioxane in above standard levels in our testings last year. So those new test wells will start to go in September 11th, and it will take approximately a week to complete those. Once we get the water samples from those new wells tested, we'll have a better sense and better understanding in terms of what we're looking at for the spreading of that chemical within the landfill area. So I'll really be waiting to get those results in as quickly as possible on that, and I'll keep the board updated as soon as I get information. This next item, I've been made aware that there's a group of high school students who are concerned about what they felt was a number of gas leaks in our community. So I contacted Eversource to find out exactly what do we have for known gas leaks in town. And it was an interesting conversation. The government representative there explained to me that there's 3 different classes of gas leaks. The first class being of such size and volume that it would be considered an immediate hazard, that they would do an immediate response with our public safety to make sure that people were removed from the area, and that they would be able to handle any imminent threat of explosion or fire. The second class is when they know that there's an issue with pipes and it's scheduled to be addressed at their earliest convenience. So that's something that they've been made aware of. They've found it. They'll get the work crews out there as quickly as they can. And then the third class is just when they get reports of gas odors in the area. And, you know, often you'll drive by an area or walk by and you might smell the odor, that typical odor that gas has, which it's an additive within the gas itself. So that's the third classification. And according to the government rep, Joanne Leary of Eversource, we have no Class 1, no Class 2 leaks, luckily, in West Boylston. We have had at various times reports of gas odors around the town. They've all been investigated and reported in accordance with the state and federal requirements. But more importantly, she wants us to ensure that our residents know what to do if they do smell a gas odor and how to report that. They do have a 1-800 number. It's 800-592-2000 to report it. We'll be putting up more specific information on our town website so that people do know who to contact if they do smell a gas leak in their area.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Is there any consideration for a gas leak near the schools?
She did not mention that. What they do is once they have a report of a gas leak, they do send a survey crew out there to do testing. So I would think in the process of that evaluation, they determine if it's something that becomes a more imminent concern based on population density, et cetera.
Yeah, but there is a smell, strong odor near the elementary school when you go to that manholes, that area.
Okay.
So I did mention to the DPW director. So that time the Eversource did go there and they said, yes, there is a smell. I'm not sure, what happened after that.
Okay, well, we can make sure
This-
that gets reported now.
This happened months ago.
Okay.
Is that what the high school were complaining about? People from high school?
I did not receive a definitive list of what their concerns were. I just had been told that what I was told was that they had identified approximately 50 areas of leaks in town. And obviously that was something that sounded very concerning.
Was it a project they were on or something? Or?
It sounded as though it was a group of students that were just working on this as a public interest project.
So the high school students found 50?
I don't have the details, Chris.
Yeah,
But I was
so, 'cause
trying to-
how did they go around?
I think it was
smelling?
probably the odors that they were smelling, and I'm not sure if they reported each of them at the time that they found it. I had been told that they would at some point be coming to the Board of Selectmen to present findings, but I figured, why wait? This is something that we should be more proactive about.
Okay.
Eversource.
And then in terms of miscellaneous updates, with the construction of the new rental apartments on North Main Street, we will now be at 8.17% of our required mandated subsidized housing inventory, which is fantastic. We're required to have 10%, and so for us to get up to the 8.17 is a big increase. And the other thing was we are now eligible to submit a new community compact proposal for best practices for the next few years. Our original proposal, which we submitted in 2016, was approved for the implementation of the Complete Streets program, which we've done the prioritization plan and will be applying for the Tier 3 funding. We received funds to do the updated pavement management plan and pavement condition index, which is in process. And also we've received funds to do the housing production plan update, which hopefully will be starting this fall. So we're moving ahead with each of the things that we agreed that we would do and that we received funding to do. So now at the next meeting, we'll be looking to see what best practice areas we might want to be considering for the next few years. And that's it for my report.
Thank you. Fifth update, consider design a contract with Kayola and Burnett for a senior center, as the FISC committee has approved it.
Could we just get, I had concerns that it went up $40,000 from,
So the
but they
contract,
knocked off 5,000.
the contract value is $352,000 in total. That's for all the different design phases of the senior center project. That includes construction administration. Excuse me, it does not include construction administration. That value for the contract was based on an assumption that the construction cost for the senior center would be $4.2 million, which is basically equal to the construction cost for the police station. This contract for the senior center is, when you look at everything being taken out, is about $27,000 more than the contract that we had with CBA for the police station. And that's where there had been some discussion at the FISC meeting to say, why did it go up to 27,000 when it was basically, it's only been a year, roughly since we signed the contract for the design of the police station. But FISP did discuss that, and FISP did vote to recommend award and signing of the contract by the selectmen.
Well, it went up 32,000 more, but they knocked off 5,000 because of the issues we had
Correct.
with the merging of the two companies.
Correct.
So I just thought that, I mean, unfortunately, I think they saw that we were in the position and we let them do work before we had a contract, we were kind of stuck. And I think that increase was way more than a year. I mean, I think even Tony said it wasn't really the increase.
He didn't seem to think that that was the industry standard, that you were seeing that much of a jump from year to year.
I think they took advantage of the situation.
No, the thing is 4.2 million times 8%, that will be 3,200. Right?
320.
320.
It was actually 8.59%, I think, Raj. What they did was they developed their contract value using the state's guidelines for designer contracts, depending on the type of the building that's being designed and the size of the building that's being designed. The state actually has percentage values of what the contract should be, percentage of construction value. And so that's how they developed their number.
So this is more than police station, more percentage than police station?
This will be approximately $27,000 more than the
No,
contract.
no, I'm not asking. Cost, 8% is the, 8% of the cost of construction is the architect fee. Is this more than 8% for the senior center?
8.5.
That's what you said.
So I thought it was 8.59, I don't have that document.
809.
I think for the police station it was 8%, that's what I remember.
8% would be 336 versus
Yeah.
352.
No, for the police station, I still remember, it's like 8%.
I think you're correct.
The one thing is, it's bothers me is, if they would have not started the project before the agreement, we still have a bargaining capacity over there. But now, since they started, whatever they want, we have to agree on it.
You still have the ability to look at the contract values for stages that have not been completed yet. But based on the discussion that took place at FISP the other night,
I agree. I still, maybe in the near future, if we are doing something, sign the contract and let them start the work. So that way, we still have, they won't be asking 28,000 more. If they ask 28,000 or 30,000 more, we could have gone to another contractor, another firm.
Well, one thing we have to remember is they did a lot of redesign on Caitlin's.
Yeah, but that's what they have to do, but that's the,
I know.
it's a preliminary conceptual plan. From that, they are developing. That's why the 8% fee. Anyway,
I think we were stuck, and I think they took advantage of the situation, and
Yeah.
and we're gonna pay for the extra. I know in the big picture, it's only $32,000. You could say it's such a small percentage of the project, but it's still, I don't think it was a good thing they did. They could have come in lower, I believe, but.
All right, so we hear a motion?
I'll do a motion that we accept Kayla and Benek for senior center as presented.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, in general update on the senior center and police station, I was there at the meeting Monday. Should be ready for the end of September. They're hoping to get everything cleaned up so we can actually work on it. It should be almost ready to go. So it's exciting. There's a lot of work going on, and it's really coming out nice. As far as the senior center, Chris,
We just have some dates in regards to scheduling, looking at the plans and everything. I think we just set one date so far. So we're gonna meet, I think next Monday. I think that was next Monday, so that will be the first time since the FISC meeting that we will meet with the architect and the project manager and things like that.
This is a subcommittee?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's all we, that's all we have, except for just agreeing to the designer's contract.
All right, appointments and resignations. Resignation of Robert Chisholm as an at-large member of the Fifth Committee in conditional upon appointment as a designee of the Council on Aging to the Fifth Committee.
Keep putting on us.
But then he signs off for something else.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
All in
So the
favor?
next one, you're gonna
Aye.
read the next one is the appointment.
I thought I just read, oh, I'm sorry,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, concurrence on the appointment of Robert Chisholm, 91 Hillside Village, to the Fifth Committee as a designee of the Council on Aging effective September 7, 2017, for a term to expire April 30, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Announcing business whose name will appear on the Welcome to West Boylston Gateway sign. Ollie's Restaurant won the drawing, and he's gonna contact Nancy and get the sign going, and it'll look nice. That'll be the first person we've had on the sign, so that will be nice. And legislators will meet on with the board on October 18th, and prior to that meeting, they will conduct an at office hours at 6 o'clock in the land use meeting downstairs. 2017 legislation breakfast meeting, September 22nd, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Stowe Community Center. And then September 29th, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Auburn Town Hall. This is what we had here last year, isn't it? That same thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
They do several each year.
And this Saturday, Holy Cross celebration, 2 o'clock at the library. And they have a few other announcements. Let's see, I just said the Holy Cross gift celebration at the library at 2 o'clock. There's be Holy Cross to provide extended hours for the library. The library board is welcoming people to gather with some neighbors, enjoy some sweets, and stop in the library to catch up on what's new. And the Rail Trail 20th anniversary celebration is Saturday, September 30th at 10 o'clock. In October town meeting, October 16th at 7 p.m. in the middle high school. And October 18th, as they just announced, office meetings with Senator Harriet Chandler and Representative Jim O'Day. That's at 6 o'clock downstairs in the meeting room. Any other future agenda items?
No, no, sir.
Motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Take away this thing.
Take a town meeting in the calendar.
Just in case.
That guy did a good job in that. Really good job.
Not this guy.
No,